I know that I have to get this up on YouTube too, so let me just bear with me 1 second. Okay, there we go. So, like I said, what I am going to do is I'm going to share my screen here and go over this curriculum a little bit so there's no confusion, because there is some confusion. So, the order of things, it struck me as I teach this more and more and more, is important. And it's important in the context of this model that I've been following for quite a long time. And so, why is this doing this? Hang on. Let's see. There it is. Okay, this is a little screwy. So, am I back here? Am I still going? Am I here? But you can't see me, right? Okay. How about now? We good? We back? Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share the curriculum. Shauna, just tell me that you see that now too. Okay, wonderful. So you'll notice that what I've done here is I've gone back and forth a little bit with breaking this into strategic sections. And the reason for that, let me go back, and I know I've spent a lot of time doing this, but I'm going to have to show this thing now too. There's a model that we follow, and if you've never seen it before, it's a very simple Parthenon. And so now I have to show that. Hang on. Let me see this. I'm all over the place. I told you it was a hot mess tonight. I'm telling you, I'm going to get this. I'll go entire screen instead. You're going to see a bunch of things here in the beginning. I swear I'm going to get there. Okay. And share. Okay. So in a second here, you're going to see the model. Yeah? Can you see the model? Good. Okay. So the point being is that when you go through a 12-week course, you're actually trying to teach the strategies, the what to do. Is not necessarily how to do it. Yes, I get into that. If you are a Griffin agent, yes, you get all of the how to do from us. Realty Classroom agents, yes, all of that. If you're a guest, it's a lot of how to do, and then we tease you a little bit, not tease you on purpose, but we show you a little bit of how we do it. But that's the order of things that I wish I knew before I ever got into this business or any other business, right? Michael Gerber, in his book, The E-Myth, talks about how does the business really work? And I think that's a question nobody really asks. All we ask in this business is, I want to sell a house, where are the leads, right? So, and it's very naive because it's a very tactical approach with no strategy at all. Whereas what we've talked about in the first couple of weeks, and I'll pull the curriculum back up in a second, you'll see me framing it not necessarily from the top to the bottom, but that's sort of how it's working here. I don't really get heavily into strategic measurement and expansion. I do dabble in those and trying to help you keep oriented, but I will keep making this course better and tell you how our system is now teaching Griffin agents from Seattle, Washington to Arizona to Cape Cod to Boston, and then everybody else that's in the Realty Classroom. It's the same thing. Always, right? It's the same thing. Whether you're brand new to the business, getting restarted in the business, whatever it might be, we're trying to teach these strategies, and they relate to any type of a small business, especially because most small businesses really don't start off with a system unless, of course, they're a franchise. So you could open, for example, a Papa John's. They're going to tell you exactly what ingredients to use, how long to cook it, exactly how to present it, etc. So you could start a singular Papa John's and you would get a formula. Well, in our business, you don't really have one. And there is no brokerage that does it this way. So we became unique in our attempt to give you what is really a franchisable way to do things. And that's the model here. And that's why it's built like this. So you have to think first in strategic, visionary ways and plans before you can go into the tactical. Otherwise, you probably spin out of this business pretty quickly, and that would be sad. So seeing this model, you'll recognize that we needed a business vision, then we needed a vision for ourselves. I'm actually going deeper into that today. You'll see how you strategically you think about creating an image, a self-image as a profitable real estate agent, even if you just want to sell the minimum one deal a year. Kathy and I talked about that today for Griffin agents. We really would like to drive them, to this minimum mentality. Of course, we want them to do many more, but a lot of people are never taught how to do that one deal properly. And that's how a franchise approach works. But you have to see yourself being able to do it. We are certain, like almost 100% certain, that we have a system that can help anybody, but we don't know that anybody can help themselves. So that's going to be part of the strategic leadership vision for yourself tonight. That leadership vision is self-leadership, right? And then as the course rolls on after that, then we get a little bit more strategic planning. So we have a couple of these visions of, okay, the business works based off of, these certain things, and I have to be this certain person. But then we get into marketing, which leads to a very important topic about converting from a lead to a prospect to a client. That's the conversion section. We do talk about closing. Because closing deals is very, very critical, how much care you put into them and what happens. And then, of course, we have the strategic past client plan, which I have to report in tonight. I'm thrilled that mine is finally, mine personally, 25 years later, is finally feeling like it's uber organized, and we're actually really showing past clients how much we care about keeping them up to date in the information that matters to them, thanking them over and over and over again with a yearly gift, and following up to say, how's it going? How's everything going? By the way, do you know anybody that could use this kind of a strategic approach? Right. And so to hear a couple of those calls tactically be made this week and me listen to them has been wonderful. So the course is going to go through these chunks. And then I want to show you what that actually looks like in the curriculum layout here. So if somebody could tell me that we are also now seeing the profitable agent plan, are we seeing that too? Did I change it? Yeah. Okay, good. Just want to make sure I'm showing my screen and not. Let me see. Okay. So going back to this is really how I've done that, right? So I felt like in the strategic business vision, the very first week I sort of took a detour and I took that infographic and I explained it. So I will, towards the end of this call, put in all the recordings so far that we've made so that you have them and you can go back and say, okay, he gets much more in depth into that Parthenon looking model on the first week, because I want you to understand how I used that to help myself understand how does the real estate agent business really work? And that means individually for you, not necessarily for me getting agents as a brokerage, but at an individual basis. Because remember, I still am trying to be individually a profitable real estate agent. I still do this. And it's very important for me as an individual and now a team around me to become a real somebody who's educated and understand the model. So I'm executing inside of that. Then the next week, it's really about setting that North Star. I talked about how I found that once I understood that this really was a business, I needed a top line financial goal. If any of you own businesses or have been in a business or even have a very basic understanding, everything shows up on what's called an income statement. At the very top of your income statement in a real estate agent business is gross commission income. See, we love to throw around acronyms and, abbreviations for things in this business, but nobody just slows down and explains. Gross commission income is all of the revenue that you would derive from listing sides, buy sides, rental sides. It's all of your gross commissionable income that comes in that you then have to pay your expenses and hopefully turn a profit. So we set that North Star. But we did it, and in that case, that's one of those calls where I definitely showed everybody, no matter what part of the group you're in, I showed everybody tactically how we do that. If you are a Griffin or a TRC agent, one of the most important things is you get a GCI goal-setting spreadsheet that we give you to fill in. And it's very easy. The exercise is very simple, very straightforward, but I can't say, I can't understate how important it really is to set that North Star. And we talked about that because that sets you up to really understand how to build a sustainable and profitable business for yourself that you determined what that top line was. And you didn't make up some ridiculous pie in the sky number. It was based in reality, based in what really happens in, for example, the Cape Cod market, in the town of Barnstable and a couple contiguous towns. What really happens? And what is it reasonably? And again, the math we did there, by the way, was we compared it to a Starbucks job. What is it to reasonably be effective in this business part-time? Because I tell all of you, don't quit your day job when you first come in this. So treat it like a part-time business opportunity versus a part-time job that you might get at Whole Foods / Starbucks, because those are the two places I would work if I needed to get a part-time job. But when I did out the math, and I think I used the model 765-ish or 750-ish, which is the median price for Cape Cod. And then I used 2.5%, and I came up with a certain gross commission. And it really was only going to take one commissionable event to beat 44 weeks of $20 an hour, 15 hours a week working for Starbucks / Whole Foods. One. So you break all the financial modeling down to very simplistic pieces that you can see that are reasonable. Now, of course, if you want to do 100, 165, 200, whatever the number is, once you have the financial strategy in front of you, you can tweak it tactically and then understand what it's going to take you. And here we go with the strategic leader to become, like, right? This is what you're going to be. So we got this business that's based on this very basic math, but now tonight we land on, well, how are you going to bulletproof your mindset? And that's a strategic conversation. It's not necessarily tactical. There's some books that we'll talk about tonight that will help you get there, but this is one of my favorite subjects. Any of my coaching clients that have been around me for 15 to 20 plus years, they know this is my wheelhouse. This is very important stuff to me. I use all of this stuff regularly. I've trained my kids on how to think like this. It is extremely powerful, immutable, psychological warfare, right? That is being taught here. And I say warfare because the animal brain wants to shut you down. It doesn't want you to become a profitable real estate agent. It wants you to do just enough. In fact, it doesn't even want you in this business as a part-time business opportunity. It just wants you to do just enough. Well, the problem is there's that thriving brain that's waiting for you, sitting at the end of your bed every morning and going, come on, you can do better than this. And that's what tonight's about. Okay. So we are going to land on to this, and it's going to look weird because it's a little bit all over the place, but I'm going to start the slideshow, and Shauna, give me a shout out if you can see something that says how to develop your profitable agent mindset. Can you see that? Good. No, you cannot? You can't see that? Okay. Tell me now. Can you see that? Okay. Hang on. Let's make sure. Okay. Go back. Let's go back to it. Tell me when you can see. Let's see. Okay. Who doesn't want to see Shauna twice? Come on now. Okay. All right. So you have it, right? You can see it. We're good? Okay. So how to develop your profitable agent mindset. Really important stuff. Well, one of the things that I want to talk about tonight is going to be self-image development. So one thing I will tell you is there is a book that significantly impacted the way that I learned that there were actually mindset tools. So this is a tactical suggestion before I get into the strategic discussion here, that self-image development is a very real thing. It's very, very possible to do at any point in your life. You're not too old, you're not too young, all that nonsense. It turns out if you just know how to do it, then you can really use some tools to do it regularly, because it does atrophy. Like I said, what I've learned psychologically speaking is that it's the battle between the thriving brain and the surviving brain. The surviving brain is like the animal brain, the lizard brain. It wants to just eat, sleep, and drink water enough to survive. It doesn't want to do more than that. And that's when you hear this comfort zone or the thermostat effect and all these things. It's set to survival, not thriving. But it turns out that there is something called the theater of the mind, and it's discussed in a book by the great Maxwell Maltz in his book Psycho-Cybernetics, which I know I know it sounds like something Tom Cruise belongs to, but psycho-cybernetics simply means mind steering systems, mind steering systems. And that book had a significant impact on me personally and as a coach, as a profitable real estate agent. I used the technique to move from, also more recently in my history, from an everyday transactional high volume realtor to a luxury realtor. And these were just very simple techniques. And it wasn't something that I had to, put myself in a penance mode and carry hot rocks up to the top of the hill like Sisyphus and keep rolling back down. I didn't have to do that. All I had to do was understand that there are actually real techniques to program your self-image. And so that's a lot of what we'll talk about here tonight. So the theater of the mind, according to Maltz, is a place where you can visualize and create your ideal self-image. So just to give you some background on Maltz, he was a plastic surgery a little bit after the turn of the century, really, or really 1940s and 50s. I think he proliferates. Bronx, great New York accent. If you want to Google him and look him up on YouTube, you can see him speaking in his own New York tone. And he was a very successful plastic surgeon who learned a lot about this thing that he termed self-image. He could fix somebody's face to whatever the perfect proportions of the day were or are, and they could look in the mirror and say, oh my gosh, I don't look any different. And he could do that same surgery for somebody else and say, oh my gosh, I'm a whole new person. And what he realized, it was actually the lens through which we see ourselves that affects what we see. And that's what he termed the self-image. So it's really important to understand that your self-image can either limit or empower you depending on your beliefs and perceptions. Now, where do your beliefs and perceptions come from? Well, unfortunately, a lot of them come from the way that we were raised, the environment we were raised in, whether it's familial at the very base level, it's your schooling, what happened in school. There's so many things that when you're young and impressionable, help really form this self-image, for good, for bad, for ugly, whatever it might be. That's just what happens. And we start to develop this perception of who we are, and it can become very limiting. Or on the other hand, maybe you were one of the blessed who found really good mentoring and people that just built you up and were always positive. And it doesn't matter, by the way, either way. It's just that we become conscious about this, right? And by the way, psychologically speaking, always remember when you're learning and you hear something for the first time, you're going from an unconscious incompetence. In other words, you don't know what you don't know, to a conscious incompetence. And you say, oh my gosh, all this time, all I had to do was go read this book and practice these techniques. So maybe that's the good result that comes from tonight. But whatever happened to develop who you are and the way you see yourself today is irrelevant to how you use these techniques. I'm not saying this is easy. That's not what I'm saying. If you've developed a lifetime of a thinking pattern about who you are and you perceive yourself in a certain way, for example, I always perceive myself as a blue-collar, hardworking person because that's the family environment I grew up in. They were entrepreneurs in the liquor business, wholesale liquor salesmen as growing up. Then they became retailers in that business. I grew up since I was a kid hustling. Right? Quote unquote work ethic. Every time there was the summer break or there was a winter break, I was at the store working, right? And so I developed this self-image as a grinder, as a worker, right? And the bravado that goes along with that. Unfortunately, early on in my career, I carried that image into doing this business, which made me very tactically, very quickly. Because when you talk about grinding and working hard, really what you just conjure up is transactions and doing a lot of them. You give no thought, none, to how much is first of all, you give no thought to how does this business really work? Because you do by default what that animal hustling brain says, sell anything. If anybody breathes the two words real estate next to each other, sell them a house or sell their house, right? And that's what it was like. I always joked that my business vision in the beginning, when I went to Realty Executives, I hit it off with the 4 partners who owned it. They were great. They said, listen, we've never hired it without a license, but you go out and get that license and you're hired. And so I did. And so, whoop, guys, you got to mute your mics for me, okay? Because I'm in lecture mode and I can't see that. Please mute your mics. So the point being is that I brought that in to a tactical approach with no strategic business vision for doing at least, and this is where the profitable real estate agent planning comes from. It comes from this new vision where I said, well, wait a minute. I don't want to just be a grinder. I want to be the most profitable real estate agent that I can be. And if I'm going to move myself from the grinder who does anything, which, by the way, when you start chasing transactions, you definitely end up left of the median. Why? Because you're so addicted to trying to do deals that it's easier to find a lot of buyers to talk to versus a lot of sellers to talk to. So it's just by default that you end up that way with that kind of mentality. But when I started to see myself differently as a profitable real estate agent, and I felt, shame on you, Danny, you grew up in the, after college in the venture capital business, the investment banking business. I knew better. I knew what profitable businesses looked like. I knew how they did things uniquely. I knew all that. But I just had this own self-image. And remember, you're not working for somebody when you're doing this. You're an independent contractor. So you are an individual. So the minute, even if I give you my system on a silver platter, you still see it the way you see yourself. And that's what I'm trying to make you conscious of tonight is be careful. Because if you're like me and you just want to do deals and that's all you're doing, you're going 100 miles an hour and you're not thinking strategically. You're not slowing it down. You're just trying to bring that grinder's thing. Well, I'm going to do it. Yes, fine. You can bring that energy, but you've got to bridle it and point it in the direction of the business vision of being profitable. So those beliefs and perceptions that you have with you tonight, you have to double check them to make sure they're consistent with being a profitable real estate agent who understands the business vision that this business works primarily off of listings. And if you want to be profitable, you want to focus on acquiring listings at or above the median price, period. We can't get away from that universal truth. Yes, of course you will do buy sides, but it would be the same thing that applied to them, that if you're looking for buy sides in aggressive ways, then you still have to see yourself as being profitable real estate agent through the self-image that you can create right now by saying it and starting to look for buyers at or above the median. Now, none of that means we're going to throw away an opportunity to do business that somebody wants our help. Like somebody calls you up and they have a $300,000 condominium, you're going to do the deal. I know that. I'm going to do it too. I'm just saying as a business person, there's a thing called intentionality to direct your self-image in the profitable direction, which leads you to listings at or above the median, which then begets buyers at or above the median. See how I talk? It's all just formulaic because the strategy is very easy for me now to say to you. So beliefs and perceptions create this self-image that can limit or empower, but you are in full control of that. Next, so to change it. So if you just heard that and you're like, right? To change it, you just need to change some habits, actions, and thoughts, not necessarily in that order. I probably could move those around. What I would say is the thoughts come first. So in Maxwell Maltz's book, he talks about this concept of the theater of the mind, the ability to sit in a theater inside your mind and watch this stage in front of you. Let's pretend it's during dress rehearsal where you can see yourself as the director and you can see yourself as the actor, acting as if you are already becoming a profitable real estate agent or already are. You can use very, very, very present terms. I am a profitable real estate agent, and there I am listing that median or above listing. There I am doing that open house. There I am having that buyer come through the door. There I am sticking to the system and saying what I'm supposed to. There I am having them sign in. You see what I mean? That can all happen tonight. Now, obviously, if you work with me or Paul or Grants or any team lead that already does this, and you want to go out and see us do it, you want to quote unquote shadow once and take that back to your theater of the mind and see it being you, replacing you. For us, that's the way to do it. That's why I don't let my agents really, I don't mind a couple of times. I prefer once, because the idea is I don't want you sitting there watching me do it and me be profitable while you sit there doing what? Doing what? Trying to learn something that's fifth grade simple that I'm teaching you to do. Should be able to get a vibe for it. on the very first time you watch it. And then you should go home and practice it. In the following weekend, you should be in an open house executing on that plan because you've developed that self-image to be that profitable, successful person in the field. Well, that's all thinking. That's a thought, right? Now, the action step is, as we talk tonight, you should be shadowing me on one of my deals, or Paul or Grant or whatever. You should be shadowing us. That's the first action step. If you're a Griffin and you already know this, you should learn how to make the burgers and fries, a seller package and a buyer package. Those are actions. And then what happens is, as those actions are repeated, they become the new habit of this newly constructed profitable real estate agent self-image. That's what it just becomes. So working these backwards, the thoughts and the theory of the mind come first. Then the action steps, you just start to act as if. And by the way, what's crazy about the theory of the mind, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between mental rehearsal and actually doing it. So, for example, for Griffin agents and TRC agents, we have a whole hour's presentation, me just sitting there talking through a listing presentation. We now have a live video of me standing in an open house. You don't have to even come shadow me. Hear me discuss what's on the table and how we're going to be ready to go and handle this. So then you can watch that. And then, by the way, the best time to practice theater of the mind is when? Usually at night before you go to bed, when you've dimmed the lights a little bit, you're sitting in a nice, comfortable position, maybe not sleepy laying down in bed, but maybe sitting up a little bit in bed or your favorite comfortable chair. There's no TV, there's no phone, and you're just closing your eyes and you're relaxed. And what you're doing is you're programming your subconscious, which is really crazy, right? That's what I had to say next. So by using positive affirmations and these visualizations, you can reprogram your subconscious mind. And that, according to Maltz and Dan Kennedy, who was my mentor's marketing guru, who I learned from personally, also, he actually used this technique, Dan Kennedy did, to cure a stutter, to see himself speaking on stage in front of thousands of people, literally, as a platform speaker and selling from the stage. And that's what he did. And he became this extremely successful person because he used this technique. In fact, Dan Kennedy was so moved by Maxwell Maltz's techniques, he actually bought the rights from Maltz's wife, and he has an edited and updated version. I prefer you go back to the old school one because I think Dan tweaked a couple of things that are not as smoothly articulated as they are in the first one. He softens it a little bit in a couple spots. But again, here's a guy who, talk about a self-image as a stutterer, cured it. Like literally crazy, right? The next part of understanding how the brain works, and this comes up a lot, is the DISC personality profile. So number one, you've just learned that there's a thing called the self-image that can be, as Maltz quips, you can have plastic surgery yourself on your self-image tonight, that quickly. But then there's also understanding some of this natural wiring, this biochemical way that we're just naturally wired. And I think this is some of the most fascinating stuff to me. There's a guy by the name of Dr. William Moulton Marston, who's no longer with us, but he actually invented the lie detector test, right? So this is a fascinating person, and he came up with what's called the DISC personality profile. Now, there are others called Myers-Briggs, et cetera, but I like DISC. Tony Robbins likes DISC. A lot of people like DISC because it is very simple. I'm trying to remember, there's 26 or 28 questions where you give an adjective that you're most like this or least like this, and it will give you a score. And I actually have, somebody remind me to put that into the chat. It'll give you a score as to pluses and minuses as to dominant, influential, steady, and compliant. And it's just uncannily accurate. It's really interesting. When I first took it, I want to tell you, I think I was an 11I and a 10D. So influential, dominant, almost equal. And I was exactly the polar opposite, negative. Let's think I was negative 11C and negative 10S. So what that meant to me was, oh my gosh, here I am talking about becoming a certain leadership vision, which requires me to understand all four of these things. Because if you want to run a successful business, you better be able to drive that business forward. That's what a D does. You better be able to sell something. That's what the I personality does. You better be able to do things steadily, or you're going to be all over the place. Ask the people with ADD how easy it is to be steady, right? And then compliant. We're in a business that requires the crossing of T's, the dotting of I's, the building of systems. So you come out of the womb naturally wired to be one of these things, two of these things, but not all of these things. And you just have to become conscious that they're all required. So you have to take a DISC personality profile to take a baseline to say, oh, I get it. Under crisis, I'm going to act more like an ID, but I better dial up my S and C to build my systems and stay within them to be steady and compliant. So we're going to have to tame this. So there's a yin and the yang. And by the way, just because something's a strength, like my ID, it can also become a detriment to me. There's a yin and a yang to every one of these pieces of the personality. For example, a high D can have zero patience if you're giving a presentation to a high C. They might ask a whole bunch of questions that drive you crazy. You might be short with them and you have no chance at that business. So that's an example. Whereas if everybody's in crisis and there's a divorce and everybody's arguing, you're going to have to be able to grab everybody by the shirt collar and say, hang on, I got this. Here's what we're going to do. And that's where it's a strength. So without getting too far into each little detail, I think that's important to remember that the DISC stands for dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness, right? Those are the things that they stand for. And those are major categories of any of our personalities. And by the way, these are immutable laws, meaning unbreakable. We love to think that we're so complex. Yet the truth is, there have been a lot of people that have gone before us that have figured this all out. So to me, I stopped fighting it. I didn't need it to be my original idea. I just needed to understand, how does the world really work? Let alone what Gerber's telling us. How does the business work, or asking us that question? We have to say, how do we actually exist and function physically? Like, for example, all of that nervous system programming, right? And now all of the psychological programming. So you're starting to see these two things come together. First, we have Maltz talking about a lot of this, it is psychological, but he starts to talk about programming a nervous system. That's biological, right? So biologically and psychologically, we're intertwined. We're not getting away from this. So you have to take this inventory. By the way, isn't it great also to know you, so that when somebody's across the table, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't really like the way this guy is doing this. And that's what's supposed to be the clue. Like, okay, you better change the way you're presenting this, because this person needs you to be much more patient than you are naturally. So in real time, during negotiation, towards the acquisition of business, it's critical that you know that, because you'll walk away like I once did, saying, oh, that guy was a jerk, or that lady, was so impatient and she was arrogant. Well, no, it was me just not understanding how to really speak to that person, assuming that they were my avatar, that they had a real reason why they wanted to do something, a motivation to do so. Then I need to be good at this stuff after that, right? So, and you can see this is why I'm starting with it before we even talk about avatar and ideal client and unique selling propositions, because so what? If you don't have a baseline of how all the psychology and biochemistry works, you're nowhere. You're nowhere. You have to understand that this leadership vision is a very serious thing that you're creating. So your DISC personality profile can help you understand your natural behavior and communication tendencies, which I just discussed, right? And understanding your DISC profile can help you communicate more effectively with others by what I just said, adjusting your communication and interaction style. By leveraging your strengths and improving your weaknesses, you become more effective team member, or in our case, profitable agent. That's what it is. You're becoming more effective because this is the way you're recognizing people. I have found myself to be a very good listener, which you guys don't get to hear me, or watch me, really is the better way to say it, listening. I think when Laura, who's been with me for 19 years, came out to a listing presentation to shadow me as my client care manager so she could get really attached to how I did things, she walked out and looked at me. She says, who was that? I laughed. I said, what do you mean? She goes, I've never heard you so quiet. I said, yes, I have the 7 steps. I went through them, and I leaned in on the couple of spots only that were more important to them. And then I listened to the objections they had and I simply answered them. Because if I keep talking and I keep saying things, I'm not focused on what's important to them. And she understood it. And that was how I learned from all this. Now, of course, what helps with that is actual real experience with real people, but not unless you have consciousness of this. See, I didn't have consciousness of this. And my fall, not my fall back, but my lack of understanding this knowledge, which I then once subsequently accumulated, what I lacked in that, I was just trying to sell on muscle. I was all tactic. I was all about, did I build rapport? Is there a connection? Which is just foolish now when I look at it. It's just naive. It is business naivete. So you hear a lot of these tactical things from the gurus out there, because everybody's one now, and it's just so far off without strategically understanding how this all works. And then you say, well, I wasn't good at real estate. No, you just undereducated. That's all, because this isn't rocket science, right? Then the other thing I think is important as part of this self-image development is that it never stops. I can't believe how many people think they're going to get coached for like 30 days on something, 60 days. I got it now. What? Like every day that you wake up, there's this battle between the thriving brain and the surviving brain. And it's constantly fighting to stop you from doing what you're supposed to do, which means at the extreme, it's atrophying you. And at the real extreme, it's devouring you whole. You could make this really like a devilish thing too. At the very, very extreme, Stephen Pressfield in his wonderful book, The War of Art, calls it the resistance. And so if you have a religious context, it's the devil, right? And that wants to kill you. So this is a really serious thing to me. You don't even have to have a religious context. I'm just telling you that anything that you don't constantly try to improve and work on, then you are 100% atrophying and going backwards on this. Now, the Japanese term for this is Kaizen. It is this slow, steady, continuous improvement over time. If you really want to ever learn about Kaizen like I did, I remember falling down into the rabbit hole about Toyota. And Toyota and the Japanese commitment to Kaizen is really incredible. If you think about this, during the recession, as I was creating this persona for the recession and I was still doing entry-level houses, it just wasn't appropriate in my mind's eye and my self-image to show up at these houses in a fancy car. So I went out and bought myself a Prius. My friend owns a Toyota dealership. And I said, listen, I got to show up in something, humble. And this is a long time ago now. So think about this. The recession in real estate hits hard in the fall of 2009. It really gets into us 10 and 11. We're in the thick of it. So about, I would tell you, probably 2011 or so, 10, I get a Prius. Back then, here we are 15 years later. Back then, that Prius went, I think I could get close to 50 miles to the gallon in a hybrid engine. That's how far ahead of everybody else Toyota was when it came to efficiency. And still to this very day, they blow everybody else out of the water. BMW now has a mild hybrid. I know because I'm in the middle of getting rid of a Jeep and looking at these cars, Volvo, mild hybrid in these places. But the Japanese are like so far out in front of it, it's ridiculous, in particular Toyota, because they've committed to this long, continuous, slow improvement. They don't try to retool things and reinvent the wheel. They just slowly improve, right? And that's why they're such an incredibly successful brand. By focusing on continuous improvement, you can make small incremental changes that add up over time. When I look at my business personally, as I change my self-image, now probably I wish I could pinpoint an exact date for you, but there's a time where all of a sudden I'm doing some buyer internet leads and I make the decision that I'm not going to get any leads. I'm going to throw them all out below the median price. That was the moment that I really started this intentional improvement to move towards luxury. It ended up me changing the signs, the website, everything. And it was just slow. It was a little bit at a time because every project is maddening. The seller plan, the buyer plan. In fact, I'm sitting there continuously improving that. I have it printed out here somewhere on my desk. I was going to prove it to you by showing it to you, but it's buried here somewhere. But you can see scripts and things. And here it is right here. Buyer plan, seller plan, sitting in my face, right? All rewritten. Magazines that I liked, Sotheby's, I liked some of the stuff that they did in Aspen, Colorado. So I grabbed that for some ideas too. So it's just all a constant and steady improvement to elevate myself. And by the way, that's what I do. I pick a fight with the biggest brands. Now, I'm a gnat on the side of a gigantosaurus, but that's the point, is that I remember learning that too along the way, that early on, Apple picked a fight with IBM. And so all these little concepts that have come to me over time have allowed me to just continuously improve things and make it better. Gosh, my website back 10 years ago was a canned piece of crap from a company that was affiliated with the previous coaching company I was affiliated with. In fact, the changes I made to mine are still their front-facing changes. Pretty scary, right? So this commitment to continuous improvement is really what this is all about, right? And then this key to constant improvement is to establish a commitment culture and accountability. See, the greatest thing about coaching is I'm sitting here on a Wednesday night at 7:40, what's that say without my reading glasses, 7:42, doing this for free. Obviously, all my Griffin agents are here, so I'm here for you, right? But I'm committed and I'm accountable and I'm on time and I practice what I preach. That benefits me as much as it does all of you. So it's that just like when agents come to us now, I said, listen, I will be here at the 50-yard line. I can maybe reach over the 50-yard line and try to pull you towards the middle, but I can't go beg you to do this. I can't give you self-commitment for yourself. I can't give you self-accountability for yourself. You have to have those things and you have to commit to those things. So when somebody says, well, why are you doing this at all? The why has to be big enough so you can commit and you can be accountable and you can be patient. You don't have to be long time, slow tortoise patient. You can say, tell me what to do at this open house exactly. And the next weekend you can be doing it. Deidre, followed me around once or maybe twice and went right out and did it, found a couple of people, listened to me talk about, on these calls about talking to an expired, called somebody, so it's that commitment to also thinking, I can do that. I watched him do it. I'm going to do an open house and get these people prospected and give them a package. I'm going to call an expired, and then I'm going to do that every week that I can work, and it's going to become a habit. That's what it sounds like. It's so simple, but that self-image and that, non-thriving brain, the survivor, has you like this. The lack of self-belief and your survival brain have you by the throat. And you just got to say, let go, because they're your hands, right? Let go. They're your hands. So stop doing that to yourself and commit to just slow, steady improvement and trying this. I think action step in the last slide was probably one of the most important thing, right? But by continuously improving your processes and your systems, you can create a streamlined and more efficient organization for yourself. And we help you do that. Right? I mean, if you're inside our ecosphere, we give you the tools, but they're not optional. You don't cherry pick them. When we tell you to do a gross commission income goal in this course here, go do it. When we tell you to create a contact pipeline manager, go do it. And we reduce them down to the stupidest, simplest trainings. But if you don't commit to action and you're not accountable to getting that checklisted, then where are you at? You're still at starting spot. And the longer you stay at the starting spot, the more dangerous it is, because it's sort of like the shark tank opens up beneath you and down you go, right? So I think that's all what's important here. All right. So that's enough of the lecture here tonight. I want to go into this a little bit with you. I want to hear some Q&A. And by the way, I always answer questions about anything in this course here. But again, trying to just remind you, I'm trying to fit these things now more appropriately into this. Tell me if you're seeing the strategic business vision again. I want to keep this up on the screen. Are you seeing that? Yeah, Kathy, anybody? Bueller? Okay. Now? Okay, good. Yeah, I just want you to see how this all fits in. So what we've done is we hijacked it. We talked about the model the first week. Then under strategic business vision, which I've already showed you, we put that up there, right? And then today it's about you, right? This is a big one. This is about you. And those are the things. When I tell you to go get a copy of Maxwell Maltz's book, that's what I mean. I mean, go get it. When I tell you to go take the DISC personality profile test, that's what I mean. Go do it, right? So I might have. Did I close that down? I'm trying to see if I had this. Here it is. Okay. You're waiting till you're in a good mood? Yeah. To take the disc? I like that. That's good. That's good. Let me see. Tell me, one of you, any of you, if you can see the disc personality profile on the screen. Okay. I'm going to put this in the chat. Okay. So you can go to the chat, and this link to this disc personality profile is going to be there. Okay. So I cannot more highly recommend. Okay. Having a little trouble with my computer here. There it is. It's really slow. Oh, that's weird. Okay. So, oops, I sent it to Jackie. Hang on one second. I wanted to do it to everybody. Okay, there you go. E-Myth was shared. Thank you. I think it says Derek shared it. Thank you. You rock. Dispersonality, yes. Reminded Andre. There it is. Yes, Jackie. You just shoot me a text and we can do it. Okay, good. Questions here for me tonight before we wrap this. You can open up your mics now. I have a whole bunch of you in here tonight, which I appreciate. Nothing? You got nothing for me? No commentary? Everybody's quiet? What happened to you? Go ahead. Yeah, there it is. Yep, 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 yep. Thanks, Sean. Yep, bravo. Okay, other questions, thoughts here tonight? Yes. Good, buddy. How about you? Go ahead. Something wrong with the sound tonight, but go ahead. What when I said Yeah. Sure. Yeah, yeah, sure. Michael Gerber makes a very good point in his book that we're supposed to be creating if we want to build a business, we should act as if it's the first one that's going to exist in a franchisable model. So it could be anything. You could be any business that you wanted. You could become a dentist. You could become a lawyer. You could become whatever. He says, but you should understand how that business really works to the best of your ability. And a lot of that starts theoretically, right? You can observe. I mean, if somebody came into this business and they were just a keen observer of the basics, they would notice that, oh, there's an MLS. An MLS is a service. It's a marketplace very similar to the New York Stock Exchange. It's no different. It's where something gets exchanged. And I talked about that in week one, right? So, okay, great. So who gets the listings? A listing agent. Great. How does a listing agent get that? So there's already a series of questions that if we could just have the right questions and then we could get answers, we're beginning to build a franchisable understanding of a business. Meaning, if I ask all of the best questions I can because I've done the homework from Gerber, Maltz, others, which I have, right? That's what you see. Each time you see me putting up fill in the blanks, that's the best information gleaned from some of the best, pieces. But the framework starts with Gerber. You have to give him his proper, because he's the one that says, listen, you're going to be a little bit entrepreneur, a lot of bit manager, and a lot of bit technician. And you have to separate those things out and you have to understand them. So as I understood that framework, I was able to say, okay, I'm going to stay within this framework and I'm going to just continue to build systems and processes that help somebody like you who knows nothing plug in and be able to get somewhat of a predictable result. So, for example, at this point in time, if somebody were to ask me, how do oh, how do I go and get my first listing? Then I would say to them, well, that's easy. Number one, you have to make the unique selling package of information, pictures and details of properties that sold around the target. You have to know how to make a one-page statistical market update because they're going to ask you how the market is. And you better have some sort of a plan, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, for example, of how you're going to take them through the universal steps of how a listing happens. Well, that's franchisable. That alone is franchisable because you can be sitting in Seattle and I can say, okay, now strategically, from a marketing standpoint, you simply have to pick a listing target. And our business gifts us some of the easiest stuff: expireds, probates, and FSBOs, to name the three, right? Well, expireds are hiding in plain sight inside the marketplace. They're hiding inside MLS. You can see them. You can see how much they were. You can see the geography. So you can guesstimate that it's going to be a profitable endeavor. So you just have to make your unique selling proposition offer to that person in that category over and over and over and over and over each week for 44 weeks. You don't even have to keep the store open 52. And inevitably, you're going to create a prospect. And that prospect is going to be somebody that you continuously give updates of properties that sold and market updates until they let you in. When you go in, you're going to do very specific things. That's what it means. Step by step by step, I'm telling you exactly what to do. Now, of course, any smart franchise group gets together, considers changes that are happening in the marketplace, considers Kaizen-like level opportunities for improvement. So it never is just a stagnant book that just stays still and says, do exactly this from now to infinity. It's always morphing, but slightly. It's never a big rock. Oh my gosh, I'm going to jump over to the next lily pad and the next one. And that's what I recommend people don't do. Everybody's always looking at the company next door. We've already had an agent. Agent came to us and she came to 2 open houses, was learning something, and then never got on any of our calls again for 2 months and said, well, I got an opportunity to work with my friend instead. Great. What are you going to do with your friend? Right? What are you going to do with your friend? What does that even mean? In other words, it was a constructive quitting because she's a pharmacist. She's a single mom. The truth is she just can't commit to it. She can't be accountable to executing the plan. She can't do it. In that case, it's legitimate. right? So not everybody, when you give them a franchise on a silver platter, can execute. They're just their personal circumstances and their self-belief systems, they're not there. So just because you have a franchisable way of doing something doesn't also mean it works all the time. In fact, when Ray Kroc, if you watch the movie The Founder, that will give you some real insight into this. There were several places that all of a sudden decided, well, we're going to try chicken and we're going to sell corn. He's like, no, that's not what we do. We sell burgers and fries. That's all we do. And that's why Kathy laughs all the time I say it. All we teach you to do is burgers and fries, right? Because we keep that mentality. So there is no other place that I know of that talks like this, because I've coached in almost every major franchise, quote unquote, and those are franchises that don't do anything. Like Remax, this one, that one, they don't do anything. They have a brand and a logo, and that's about it. And there's about 17,000 different teachers in the EXP framework too. It's a joke, right? So it just doesn't exist. So, and I'm not saying look at us. I'm not saying there's others that haven't done this and haven't systematized, but most of those are small businesses that have their own systems that run their business. They might be franchisable, right? They might be. I don't know, but I can only speak to mine. I've never seen anything like the effort that we've put on with our mastermind group for the last, 13 years. I hope that answers it. It's not an easy thing to answer. It exists. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.